Very good. Time is now 5:39. Community learners dedicated to building lives. The work session, 5:30 p.m. Shiprock Boardroom, Shiprock, New Mexico. The work session board meeting will be broadcast through live stream on the Central Consolidated School District's YouTube channel. Item 1, routine matters. Call meeting to order and verify quorum. Ms. Haskey. Mr. So.
This is Matthew So. I am present. Thank you.
Ms. Haskey. Please respond to the microphone so people can hear you.
I apologize. Something happened to my microphone. I'm here.
All right, very good.
Sorry.
Thank you very much. Mr. Wells. Ms. Aspis. Myself, we have 3. And the time now is 5:41. Item 2, reports. A HQIM map report. Jerry Rock. Ms. Rock, yours.
Good evening, everybody. This is Jerry. I'm actually on virtual, and I'll be presenting the HQIM math grant and our vision of what we've been working on. So thank you, President Haskey, Vice President Wells, Matthew, Mr. So for being here, and Mr. Montoya. I'm going to go ahead and present this particular grant. It's a math grant that we wrote at CNI in conjunction with looking at our math curriculum, which is adoption season this year. So we partnered with ANET, an outside entity company that has been helping us to streamline the math implementation and the adoption process. As you well know, in previous years, CCSD has not really had a framework or a system in place that has an adoption process for any core materials that would have been presented. A lot of times the materials were selected by CNI department and distribute, but with the vision of looking at sustainability across the district, we are now developing a framework of our own that meets the criteria of adopting core math HQIM materials. And when the grant came up from New Mexico PED, the CNI department, we went ahead and wrote the grant for the math adoption. So this here is the baseline of what we started working on. So when we looked at the math grant, we really wanted to ensure that we were including all stakeholders. And in doing so, we said, you know, what is the purpose? What is our vision? What do we want our kids to do when they leave CCSD? So when we look at the math adoption process and the rubric, we really knew that we wanted to get the stakeholders involved and not just be solely on the CNI department deciding what materials that the district was gonna adopt, because we didn't want particular buy-in from across the district. We wanted commitment, and in commitment is something that we put our biases off to the side and say, okay, we're gonna do something that's based on what our students' needs are and what our goals are at the very end when they graduate from our high school. So when we looked at this, we started from the bottom up, and we said, let's look at students. So, but before I begin, this is a vision for our CCSD math instructional vision that we came up. We brought some teachers and administrators in our CNI department came together, and we created a core team with New Mexico PED help in structuring on what we need to look for, what team players that we need to put together. So the team went ahead and created an instructional vision. So the Central Consolidated School District, we aim to ensure that every student develops a deep and lasting understanding of mathematical concepts and practices that empower them to be problem solvers who pursue and accomplish their goals. So when we created this vision, we really wanted to create something that was going to be sustainable and have a longevity and deep embedded in our district across the board. So our first stakeholder that we really focused on was students. And we came up with 4 bullet points of what we wanted our students. We wanted to actively engage in hands-on at grade level materials. So that meaning using manipulatives, visuals, discussion, building that ability to build their skills and fluency and apply the math concepts that's relevant to them in the home and into their career path. The next one, we started talking about safe schools. We talked about really developing classrooms where it feels safe for students to be able to interact with each other and to have that cultural linguistics response. Really getting and looking and targeting not only our ELs, but also our SPED students, looking to see what we can do to really develop an environment that they are able to experience. Third bullet was to collaborate with partners in small groups. We talked a lot about this, working in small groups. We want our kids to be able to justify mathematical reasoning. And that's something that, you know, as across the district, we started to notice. We go through the process over and over, and we don't really stop and ask our kids, well, what are your thoughts? What are your thinking? We also started talking about academic vocabulary. What does that mean? How does that apply to the math concept? But the biggest one that we really started looking at was the experience of productive struggle. We know that math is not easy to teach for some teachers and some kids, but for kids, task, risk, and learning from mistakes. And that's where Can you still hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Yes. So the next stakeholder that we looked at after we really focused on students, was we started talking about teachers. And we have teachers on this committee, and they pretty much said, you know, what we asked them, what are you seeing? What are you feeling? And these were some of the things that really focused with the teachers, was implementing high quality instructional materials consistently across the board. They wanted to use materials to plan rigorous grade level lessons that focus in our coherent and culturally linguistically responsive to the community and what students were experiencing out in the world. The other thing they realized too was this was really an eye opener for us, because we talked about students before creating a safe environment. The teachers also said, you know, we need to create a safe, supportive environment So we encourage productive struggling, but when we know that they're starting to struggle, we start guiding them in the facilitation of learning the concepts. The next bullet was facilitate student-driven learning, being able to explore, model thinking. That was the big part, and having a release responsibility, a gradual release for the students. So teachers found that they still needed a lot of facilitation and support with students in that aspect. But if they won't be able to do that if they don't have a safe environment. So they kind of tied those two things together. Then they said, you know what? We really need to listen to our students. We need to see how are they learning? What are they thinking? What do they understand? What are the purpose of the questions that are being asked? Can they justify and explain their reasoning, their thought process? So when we looked at this as teachers, these were some things that the teachers came out. The next one we looked at was school leaders. We have administration sitting on this team, and they spoke out and they said, well, we need consistent high use of HQIM materials. One of the same expectation, but they broke it down not into just one layer, but they said in multiple layers. But they still said that they needed to ensure that there's a fidelity to the tier 1 expectations when implementing the HQIM. The next one, that bullet, is that they want to build a supportive learning environment, not just for the kids, but also for the teachers. So empowering teachers to grow. How do we do that? We talked about bringing, right now we have Empower coming in and coaching teachers in the classroom. And so we talked a little bit more about how do we create that? How do we make that stronger to support our teachers in the classroom? Principals also talked about engaging as instructional partners. They wanted in their OFCC feedback to the teachers after a initial or walkthrough observation. They asked open-ended questions like, I wonder if you did this, what would the outcome be? So really engaging the teacher through the thought process of really looking at and giving feedback and collaborating with teachers and utilizing their strength practice to help their implementation of their procedural learning. And then the last one that they talked about was create a culture of growth and continuous improvement. You know, we just because we get the initial training doesn't mean that's going to be the end. So how do we develop a framework, a systematic implementation to improve and to continuously improve, providing resources? Mentoring was also brought up, protecting teacher time so teachers can learn the process and learn the strategies. So then it became our district leaders. We sat down and we said, well, what does it look like from our end as district support? What does it feel like? How do we get there to help achieve this vision? And so we decided as a team at CNI was that we don't want to create this framework and hand it out to everybody. We wanted the commitment of the students, of the teachers and the administrators. But there was one aspect that was brought up that we all talked about that was embedded was our families. We talked about our program, Eureka Math, mid-school math, and big ideas that we use across our district. Well, how effective our parents in our community are able to help their students when they go home with additional homework, because that's a total concept that they really struggled with. A lot of times parents call and say, we don't know how to help them. So that hence where we get the after school tutoring and some of those support programs. So when we looked at this as a whole to create sustainability in the community, we looked at families. So we wanted to engage in a two-way communication with teachers. Teachers gave feedback in this. They said, we talked to the parents, but there's no feedback. How do we help them to help their children in the learning process and to become partners and to support the process? So the other thing that we talked about was feel informed and equipped? Do we receive clear information and resources so that they can confidently support math learning at home? And we had a really depth-in conversation about this because a lot of times our parents don't understand the math that we send home. So how do we help our parents not only understand the information, but also how to navigate in sources? Sometimes it's online implementation. So how do we help our parents in creating their support at home? We also talked about participate in school-based math activities. All the schools are doing family math units, and they're encouraging parents, but they want to build how to better understand instruction, what it is to strengthen home connections, how can teachers and parents or home can be connected, and how can we work together in addressing how we want our students to learn. And the last one we talked about, which was experience trust and welcome and partnership. When we go in at CNI, we don't want our teachers or administrators to feel like this is aha. We've been working really hard to create that trust responsibility with every single teacher and every single administrator. And when we talk to parents and leadership, we try to really build that trust and welcoming portion of it. And so when we talked about collaboration, we also want to make sure that we value the active contribution that parents are giving or wanting to give to be able to help us in really building this solid foundation of the HQIM to move forward in embedding a solid alignment that CCSD can provide from very early on. And we're talking about even pre-K, because our pre-K is in our elementary. How do those little babies work and scaffold across the continuum all the way up to high school? How do we do that? And so when we wrote this grant for the math grant, the HQIM, it wasn't just about adoption. It was about how do we make this sustainable, and how do we get commitment for our children for us to implement a solid implementation for math. And that is really what the grant is. The grant is that we were awarded was $150,000 for implementation. And so we worked in collaboration with New Mexico PED, Anthony Burns from CNI over at the state level. So we constantly are doing reporting. We're meeting, like today we had our adoption review process, and we brought the team together in the boardroom today, and we reviewed some of the math materials, and we used very strategic and targeted rubrics that how we were going to assess what key components does each math program have. So we had teachers, we had principals, and we had the CNI in this this review of the materials. And then we based it based on the rubric of expectation of what qualifies as HQIM. So we have to report almost every 2 or 3 weeks, and this is a continuous PLC that we're calling it. Our next one will be in January, when we start really finalizing and really note-taking and share across the board what were the top 3 programs that is going to meet the needs of our kids through the HQIM process. And that is it for me. Are there any questions that you have?
Thank you for that. Ms. Haskell, any questions?
I don't have any questions, but I'm looking forward to seeing how this goes. Thank you.
I don't have any questions at all. Thank you very much for the presentation and all the information.
Absolutely.
Ms. Haskell still on? Does she have any questions? I do. First next question is, Mr. Rod, is explain to me what a high quality math instruction looks like.
So HQIM high quality instructional material is core programs that have been identified by New Mexico PED, the CNI department. That process is a whole different process in itself, is where companies present their materials in certain districts across the state, or schools pilot these programs in their classroom. And teachers, like what we did today, is they take a rubric, a standard rubric, and they measure and they implement, and then they give feedback, and then they rate the program in certain components of what the PED has identified as HQIM. So the HQIM process is, once they meet a certain criteria or a certain percentage of level of based off of the rubric, those that meet the cut for HQIM, that meet CLRI, meet the high impact or rigor and all of this, then those materials go on a listing to New Mexico PED, and they put that listing out for the schools across the, or district across the board, and they identify these are the top programs that meet the criteria for high quality instructional materials. And then from there, we've taken this process, we looked at the top 4, we sat down as a team, and we started looking, what is important for our kids, looking at our data, what are targeted areas that we're seeing holes in our math that kids are not getting? What do we need to do to start closing those gaps? So it was very strategic on how we selected 4 programs, the top 4 programs out of the HQIM listing. And those were the materials that we were evaluating today with our rubric that we set of how we want see what's happening with our CCSD students. So one big one was, rigor. The other one was CLRI. That was a big one for us because we wanted to know, how is a math program going to be able to address the CLRI, which is also one of the requirements for the Yazzie Martinez case. So we were very rounded about what we were looking at, how we were looking at it, but more importantly, how is it going to help our kids in our district? So that is how the HQIM program is selected, and we just narrowed it down instead of just randomly grab a bunch of companies and telling us to send us the books. We actually really targeted the areas of our needs at CCSD, and we took the top 4, and those are the top 4 that we evaluated today. And then we still have to get some more input, and we're going to be having a survey sent out, I'm hoping by tomorrow, to all the teachers that teach math, to be able to give feedback on the survey as well. So we'll do that survey at the beginning of the year, and then we'll do another one at the end of the year to see what type of impact that this framework is going to have with our implementation.
Okay, so next question is, what are the 4 that you decided to use or that you're looking at?
I'm sorry, I can't hear.
4 math programs.
So today, what we evaluated, we haven't gotten through all of them. Today, for elementary, we did HMH math. We also did Savas math, and actually we did 3, and the McGraw-Hill math. We looked at those 3 components, and we did score them. And we do have a spreadsheet right now, but it's not quite filled out completely yet. The secondary schools, we had middle school look and high school look at, there was a, what was that?
Continue, please.
Okay. They looked at Carnegie math programs. So they took apart the middle school and then the high school Carnegie, and they were scoring those programs. So you had math, middle school teachers and administrators doing the middle school math. Then you had high school teacher or high school principal doing the high school math. And so their rubric was a little bit different than our elementary, because then it becomes content area.
Another question. In regards to the people that are on your team, may I ask that, or ask, are all of them credentialed in math, having a bachelor's degree?
So the people on the math team, actually, when we actually initiated and went to Albuquerque with the training with New Mexico PED, we had to really look at, okay, we're looking at this team, how do we create this team? We sent out an email and we said, hey, everybody, administration, what are your thoughts about this math, becoming a math team? And so we had volunteers that wanted to be on that. Then for elementary, we put out, who wants to sit on the math team? So anybody that wanted to be on the team, we initiated that portion of it. But we also had to let them know that there's a set criteria we had to meet. We meet virtually with New Mexico PED, and we cannot miss one of those meetings. Everybody has to be on that meeting if you're going to sit on the initial team. And so far, we have had everybody at those meetings and virtual meetings. There's going to be an extension also. That's why we want a teacher survey, is that teachers are also on the team to be able to give us feedback of what their concerns are, or what their questions are as well. So it's a little different framework than what we've ever experienced. So it's being implemented to where teachers are starting to give us some of that feedback. We've actually added 2 or 3 more teachers because they wanted to be on the team. They were able to commit to the meeting times. And so those are the people that came into the initial teamwork.
Did you look at the scores of the teachers and their efficacy when it comes to teaching math?
Well, not necessarily. What we looked at is people that wanted to be on the team, that wanted to make an impact. So it wasn't a forced thing that we wanted to do. Some teachers are like, Jerry, we got too much on our plate because they're sitting on the science team, they're sitting on ELA. And so it was basically, we really want to build something that's sustainable. So the teachers that volunteered to sit on this team are the ones that are really giving us really good feedback.
Okay, so probably more important than high quality material. What about teacher efficacy? That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, so it's not closed off. If a teacher wants to join our team, we're more than happy to take anybody that wants to join.
Still doesn't answer my question, but so how do you envision this correlating up to those students that are in 4th and 5th grade still can't have a multiply? How's that going to improve that?
So when we actually looked at the HQIM materials, that was one of the areas that we really focused on. It wasn't just the kids that could not or wasn't at grade level. We also looked at kids on the other end of the spectrum, kids that were on the fence or kids that were that needed to be challenged. And that was something that we needed to really kind of pull back and say, okay, what interventions are built within this framework? And that's what we did today. Is when we looked at the 3-4 programs that we had lined up, we really looked at how does this correlate to remediation? How does this come back to looking at standards? How does the prerequisite to the standards of teaching the core standards or essential standards, and where those essential standards go to the next grade level? So we're very diligent about what programs are we looking at. For example, one program had a lot embedded with CLRI. And that was the question that we had. What do you have that's in here to help our teachers? Well, one program has a book, math ebook that's online that can do multiple language. And what was surprisingly is that some of the books are in Navajo, whereas other programs don't have the CLRI component. They just mention it, but they don't give any guidance. And so that was one of our targeted areas to making sure that we really look at what our kids needed. So this framework that we're looking at is really based and embedded, baseline is about students.
Okay, so how is it going to improve the teacher efficacy in that classroom to communicate that information that they have from the teacher to the students? How does that improve that?
Well, it really brings in a lot of turn and talks. It brings in a lot of examples. It's not 30 problems that kids need to do on a worksheet. There's a lot of embedding of small group in it. Teachers can pull supplemental materials and pick and choose based on the data or the skills that they need to teach. So they have a variety of things that they can pull from. So it's just, I look at this and I tell everybody, when you look at HQIM materials, it's like a toolbox. And a toolbox has different compartments in it. And in each compartment, there are different sets of tools. So our teachers are very adverse in data analysis. And you give them a toolbox, they know what tools that they need to pull. They don't need to pull all of it. Now they can still pull supplementals to help them with interventions. So it really gives a teacher a lot of power on what they need to pull and how to pull it and when to pull it. And with the programs, in some of these programs, they have built-in systems to where they have online supports for the teachers. If they need to troubleshoot some of the items for interventions, it's in there. So that was something that we really needed to look at. And that the teachers actually gave us a lot of feedback of what they were doing and what their concerns were with when it came to interventions and closing the gap.
Zerby?
I can barely hear you.
About now?
Yeah.
There we go. So I think you might know my opinion about the PPP. Last, the point of going to the teachers, I really appreciate that, and that's why I'm kind of stressing the efficacy, looking in the own backyard and seeing what those successful teachers are doing to move those students. To me, that's more important than going to Santa Fe or talking to those people there that don't know our kids. But,
yeah, and we built, when we looked at this framework, they just gave us a kind of like a generic framework. But when we came back, we sat down and said, okay, what is this going to look like for our kids here? Because our kids are not going to look like Farmington's, Aztec, Bloomfield. Our kids are not going to look like Las Cruces and Albuquerque. So how do we build this to fit what our kids and our teachers need? And that was the whole idea was, you know what? We need to pull them in and we need to start asking. We need to start listening and really getting their feedback on what could help us help our kids. So that's why this framework was really important. When we started talking about this, we had a discussion, you know, if we went after this grant, we know there's a lot of expectations, but is this what's best for our kids? And bottom line was, you know, if we're gonna build something that's gonna be aligned and coherent and sustainable, that's the key word, sustainable, then we need to develop a framework to help our kids with future adoption or our schools with future adoption. But it can't just be one or two people to create this adoption for the district. It's got, in order to get commitment, we have to have everybody's input. And so we went all the way to families, to students, to teachers, and to administrators, and even us as district leaders. How do we support that? And so HQIM is and I tell people this, HQIM materials is a very comprehensive program. There's a lot of parts, moving parts that are in these programs. but our teachers are very well adversed in data analysis. We work really hard with them. And so teachers are asking some really good questions when we come in. I have this data, but I have this, but the program doesn't address this. Then at that point I said, okay, so what do you do? What do you think you need to do? So I tried to guide them and support them. Well, I can pull this from somewhere else. Well, then if that's what the students need, then the supplemental materials will help in that intervention piece. So yes, the core is mainly layer 1 and gives you, layer 2 has supplemental materials, and layer 3 is intervention, but we also have outside programs, but not for math. We didn't have it for math. So it was important for our interventions to be really aligned to what our students need in the core of teaching the essential standards that they're going to be assessed at the end of the year. But it gives teachers a lot more ability to select and choose what strategies and then what skills need to teach that strategy.
Okay. I appreciate that. I know you
have a
touched
question.
on, oh, go ahead, Ms. Haskey, go ahead. I apologize.
I just was curious into, so you have this toolbox. How do you, so does that give you the ability to track its usage and who's using it, and just in comparison with the data to see how it's being utilized and so forth?
Absolutely. That was one of the key components in when we were doing a review process of these programs today, was the assessment. How is it being assessed? What type of assessments? How are teachers able to use this material to track what they're learning? But we also have, the one thing that teachers, the elementary teachers really had a lot of questions is, how is this going to correlate to what we need to pull from the programs based on some of the other assessments? So we talked about triangulation. And so looking at the strategies and looking and breaking it down to skills, then we start looking, where can you pull that from? How can you get there? And so we look at the district level, I look at the usage of each of the core programs, how much usage, how much time. And so we are able to track how teachers are utilizing it, and even students, how many students logged on to a certain component, what's happening. So, and then contrast with the teachers, or non-teachers, the principal's observation and our district observation of when we walk in, what key component are they using out of the HQIM. So we're able to triangulate our observation OFCC feedback with the online version of looking at the usage report and then looking at data.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
I believe Ms. Aspis have a question.
So hearing about the math and how we can make it better for our students, is it possible has there been a study on maybe perhaps using home ec or carpentry or anything to do working with numbers other than directly? Maybe that's the spark they need in order to grasp or make it, enjoy learning about numbers or math.
I thank you for that question. In fact, some of our programs that we did review on today did tie into careers. And so it made it a live application. One of the programs, I think it was the Savas Learning Math for Elementary, had a component in there for career path. So a lesson that was taught would show students a career path, how the math that they're learning can be tied to one of the careers that they would want to. For example, this one had to do with engineering. So they were talking about probabilities. And so it was tied directly. And there's a key component that was in there that the teacher and principal really liked, was that that was the program that tied to almost like a college career readiness implementation. So some of these math programs are tying real life applications, and then have the CLRI. How does it tie to the home? How is it going to tie then locally? And so they help kind of guide the teacher on finding additional resources to bring that into the students' real life.
I had a child that was just didn't want nothing to do with math, and yet she loved baking. And so to apply math in that way, you know, it was better, and she eventually learned.
I agree. Real life application plays a big part, and we talk about conceptual learning in our implementation throughout the district. And we talk about that a lot, because that's the hook that gets our kids interested in something that they're going to learn. So for example, in one school, the teacher took the conceptual part of fractions, and she says, okay, you know what, we're going to make our own pizza, and we're going to learn about fractions, and then when we're done, we'll eat our pizza. And so that, you know, in a unit in itself is something that kids really got engaged in. And then they got a small group, they got a butcher paper, they drew their pizza, what they were going to put on their pizza, and they talked about, you know, the variables, they talked about temperature. So that teacher outside was really initiating the conceptual, the hook in it. And she learned that through Empower, which is, we contracted to help support the teachers in the classroom with doing hands-on activities, strategies, and using the current math program. So when we looked at these programs, that was one of the key concepts that we looked at, were the three things that we really focused on in our district was conceptual learning. Are we hooking our kids to want to be here? Are we hooking our kids to want to learn math? How can we make it fun and engaging? Then we looked at the procedural. How are we going to make this happen? How can we make it fun for the kids? What do teachers need? How are we going to implement this? Or how are we going to facilitate? We're just not going to stand in front of the class and talk. We want to be able to help get our teachers to be facilitators. So kids learn, but teachers facilitate. And the last one that, you know, Mr. Carlson and Mr. Deswood really talked to us about was visible learning. When we walk into a classroom, kids should not be quiet and doing ditto sheets. Kids should be engaging in their learning and talking about what they're experiencing, how they feel, what their thoughts are, how does this apply to their real life. And so when we go in, that was some of the things that we look at is, how do we increase the visible learning in here in a classroom to really enhance what the standard is, to really get our kids to understand what they're learning.
Is there anything else, Ms. Asmus?
That's good. Thank you.
So the other question, that that grant, is that spread over time, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, or just the 1 year?
We'd had it for this year, but it's a 3-year implementation grant. So this is the $150,000 this year was just to get the framework up and running and start looking at programs. I believe next year, as long as we stay in compliance with the grant, we'll get it again next year.
The additional 150.
You have to do it again.
Yeah, it'll be, this year's is only at the 150. Next year, it'll probably be different.
Okay.
It could be more, it could be less.
So one of my big concerns, you may have heard me say this before, Ms. Rod, is when they implemented New York Engaged, or as I like to call it, New York Disengaged. Kids would go home with their homework and the parents had never seen it before and be lost.
Yeah.
So I hope it doesn't morph into something like that. And I remember exactly because I was over there at the school at Kirtland Middle School, Kirtland L, when they were doing that training, 6.5 hours, then they sent the teachers out into the classrooms to be experts. And look how well that worked.
Yeah. I was one of those teachers, so I totally get it.
So you understand where I'm coming from then?
Oh, absolutely. Out of those 5 binders, 3 of my binders were all blank papers. So,
Okay. Well,
so I get, yeah.
I appreciate the information. And again, my big thing is in the lower grades and introducing it sooner than later, much sooner than later, the numeracy.
Yes.
So you don't have those kids again that are getting into 4th grade and can't multiply, because if you can't multiply, you can't divide. You can't divide, you can't do fractions.
Exactly.
So I think that's really where the focus needs to be in the lower grades, and make sure that the efficacy of those teachers in 1st, 2nd, and 3rd are spot on, right where they need to be to challenge these kids sooner than later, so they're not having to learn it in 4th or 5th grade. So if there's nothing, go ahead. I'm sorry, I apologize.
Oh, no, that's okay. And that's our goal at in our, at CNI, is how do we empower our teachers, and how do we help our teachers empower our students? Because that's really where the learning happens. For us at the district level is trying to put all these puzzle pieces together to really support what happens in the schools. And so being a former teacher and being a former principal in the elementary and even in high school, was looking at what is our purpose. And that was something that we brought up in our meeting, is what is our purpose? Why are we here? What is our why? And we all said, hands down, it's our kids. So what do we need to do to commit to our children? And so that it was a real groundbreaking to understand that we can't keep throwing things at the teachers and expect them to do it. Well, we need to build something that is sustainable, something that works for us, something that works for our kids. And so when we went after this grant, that was the intention, is how do we do this for our kids? How do we build something that's sustainable, that even when I'm gone in 5 years or so, that this framework will continue to happen and still have all the stakeholders' input in adoption across the district.
Okay. Any further questions from the board?
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
All right. Mr. So?
I have no questions.
I have a question.
Yeah, I have no questions. Thank you.
Ms. Asmus?
Hello?
Go ahead.
Okay, I know legislation has been changing, and over the last couple of years, we get bills such as eliminating certain math classes. So I'm wondering, how is that going to affect this, their initiative and what they're trying to implement?
Well, what's happening at legislation, we work with the CNI department over in New Mexico PED.
Jerry,
and
can I
they're the
answer this
ones-
question? So that's one of the things we're looking at for secondary, because the 4th math credit, financial literacy. So that's one of the things we really need to take a look at, because the textbooks that we've seen it doesn't include financial literacy. So we're trying to make sure that financial literacy is covered. It goes Algebra 1, then it goes geometry, Algebra 2, but Algebra 2 is the one that they've kind of said in lieu is financial literacy. So the textbook for secondary that we looked at was, oh my gosh, I just lost it. Carnegie Learning. So one of Ms. Lucero from Kirtland High brought it up and said, notice how here in 2027, what we're going to need is financial literacy, but that's something that's not there. So that's something that we really need to take a look at whenever we adopt secondary.
So to further answer the question, from my understanding, state legislature in their infinite wisdom is going to impart a program like they did with reading, like letters, which I have a very, 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 very huge problem with, because there's not given any options for the educators of the school districts to decide what's going to work for them. It's being mandated which ones they have to do. And when we were down at the legislative committee meeting in Albuquerque, that's what we were told, is that the state's looking at enacting basically the same thing with math standards or with the math program, and not giving the districts a choice. Anything further?
Nope, that'll be it.
Thank you. All right, no further questions. Let's move on to item B, CCSD Gifted, Talented, and Creative Program Update by Kate Morris.
Sharon, can you present? Good evening, Superintendent Carlson, board members. Tonight I'm going to do a quick update on the Gifted, Talented, and Creative program for the 2025 school year. What?
About how legislation is changing, and they're always trying to eliminate certain math classes, and how are they with this program, do they have plan B if that happens?
Ms. Astifs, can you hear me? It's Mr. Deswood. So what I said was a couple years ago, they left it up to the districts to decide what that last math credit will be. A year ago, the recommendation was made that our district would pull financial literacy, or would have financial literacy as the third math credit, and dropping Algebra 2. So what ends up happening, I said earlier, was that when we were looking at the high school textbook adoption, the particular textbooks that we reviewed today did not have financial literacy. They would, in the order, like whenever you and I went through high school, Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2, and Financial Literacy as the fourth. So what I said was, we're going to have to find a way to adopt financial literacy, because it's a district requirement for us to purchase. Did that answer your question? You're welcome.
All right. Thank you, everybody. So I'm Kate Morris, the District Gifted Instructional Coach, and I'm going to go over the Gifted, Talented, and Creative Program update for the year. So for the 25-26 school year, we began, this was the first time in New Mexico's legislative and NMPED history that Gifted had a budget code, 4050. And so that money was allocated through the state equalization grant. And so our district received $340,795 for our 78 level 1 gifted students. So that was our total budget for this school year that we are currently in. Sharon, you can go to the next. So I have been in this position starting in January 2 years. And we have been diligently testing and identifying and growing our gifted program across the district. So one of the parts of our gifted local education agency plan is to do a survey of our students and our parents. So we did a very in-depth survey that covered lots of different issues that we'll be able to utilize in planning for professional development, the needs and wants of students and parents, and also the general satisfaction of our gifted experience in CCSD schools. So we overall, student satisfaction with the gifted education experience currently this year is at 98.6%. Gifted and talent pool students are satisfied with their experience with their gifted education program. This includes gifted seminar, having gifted teachers at each one of the school locations at least once a week, and then also our partnerships with ASU and Purdue University. Our gifted parents, we had a very good response from them as well on the parent survey. They had a 93.2% satisfaction rate on the gifted and talented program across the district, and felt like their student were receiving rigor and engagement in their program. So the 80th day is when we count the amount of students, and it is reported to the New Mexico PED for our budgeting for the next school year. I'm very excited to say for the 26-27 school year, we have 158 total students that were identified on the 80th day. And as you can see, we have really expanded the amount and the level of services that is needed individually for our students. Sharon, if we can go back to that one. The levels are very similar to levels of special education, but in gifted education, it's considered they're in a more, their setting, if they're in a higher level, it's actually their least restrictive environment. And so we have 3 level 4 students, we have 5 level 3 students, we have 30 level 2 students, and we have 120 level 1 students. We have increased the gifted identified population by 47% in this district in the last year. And we will also see the fruits of that through the CCSD gifted budget, through the NMPED and the SEG. And so we are projecting a $724,000 gifted budget for the 26-27 school year. And I'm excited to also say we do have 17 third graders who have gone through the screener process this fall, who will then are going through the gifted identification process that will be added. And we also have over 250 students that will be that have been referred and will be tested in February of this next year. So our program keeps growing. And I stand for questions.
Questions from the board, Ms. Haskey?
I don't have any questions, thank you.
Mr. So?
I have no questions, thank you. It was very informative.
Ms. Aspis?
Yes, did you call on me?
Yes.
Okay. Wondering how many, maybe I didn't hear, but how many, where's the majority of the gifted students, what grade level? And if possible, what school?
So I'm not exactly sure how you'd like me to answer that question. So I'm going to kind of start from the top and go down. Across the district at every single school, all 15 schools have gifted identified students. Every school also has a gifted teacher that is on campus at least one time a week. We have the problem with making these calculations on the fly is because there were 6 years where gifted students were not identified in the district. So we are actually still trying to find those students. So we've been targeting grades 5 through 9 this school year. Last year it was 4 through 8. So I can give you a report on that in the future if you want detailed breakdown. But it does match our school populations for the most part. So in Kirtland, where our populations are higher, you have higher rates. For Newcomb and Shiprock, they are very comparable to those populations as well. It just depends on, our objective is to be at 10% in the next 2 years, which is the gifted identification rate that is suggested by the National Association of Gifted Children. Right now, we are sitting at 4.8%, but I am happy to say after our third grade screener that we just gave, we are at 6% of the population for the third grade students. So we are very well on our way of 10% of the population. Does that answer your question, Ms. Aspis?
So the majority is in the third grade?
No, off the top of my head, I can't, we have over 158 students. I don't know where they are grade level wise. But I can prepare something and present that to you later.
Yes. If you can give me which grade level has the majority, and then also the which school, if you can break it down to that.
Yes, I can get those numbers. I just don't have them on hand right now.
We can email it to the board.
Okay.
If you would, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Anything else, Ms. Aspis?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms.
You
Morris.
didn't ask Mr. Montoya, but I don't have any questions either.
My apologies.
Accepted.
I didn't see your name in bright lights up there. Thought I heard it, but I wasn't too sure. Nothing else then. Thank you. On to item C, first reading cultural policy by Jermaine Chappelle. Ms. Chappelle.
While Ms. Chappelle is coming forward, I was asked to announce that we do have a calendar committee meeting this coming Tuesday, the 16th at 4 for anybody on the calendar committee. And
that
you're all,
8?
if you're not on the calendar committee, you're welcome to join.
AM, PM? Hey, I gotta make sure since you've been pointed over there. And we all know the importance of the calendars as tied to the budget, correct? Can't have one without the other.
Just wait for the right time. Thank you for taking your time coming up. If I could announce that.
Hobbling up here.
Bringing the community back into the calendar. I think giving that kind of invitation, I'm really glad that that you guys did, and hopefully we get some input or some participation by the community.
Ready? So at the special meeting, we were asked to come up with some language on the recommendations provided by ICO in the community regarding cultural matters of importance. And so we did have a very successful collaboration with ICO, and Superintendent joined us as well. And so what we have in front of you is some amendments to the equity policy that the board adopted November 28th, 2022. So I'm just going to give kind of a quick overview of that policy and the changes to it, and then read the language. So the new title for the policy would be, or is proposed to be, Commitment of Central Consolidated School District to Equity, Culture, Language, and Holistic Wellness and Balance in Educational Opportunities. The highlighted version or portion, sorry, of the policy as you scroll through just kind of highlights some of the language regarding culture that's already in this policy. And so it goes through the various cultural statutes, educational statutes in New Mexico. Then it talks about the Intercultural Community Outreach Department, known as ICO. And then after that is where we have are suggesting or recommending to put this new language on cultural practices. And so I'll start reading it. And board members, I did also share this document with you via Google Docs. So the title starting here, Required Elements to Meet the Needs of the Whole Child, Holistic Wellness and Balance in Schools. As part of the district's community outreach efforts, the district's administration, the ICO and HOJO Advisement Response Team, known as HEART, will meet with students, parents, staff, and community members from each culture that is present in the district. The purpose of this outreach is to determine what cultural practices, education, and considerations need to be included in this policy. The recommendations coming from this outreach will then be presented to the Board of Education for potential adoption in this policy. Regular updates regarding the implementation of this policy and data regarding outcomes attributable to this policy will be provided to the Board of Education by the superintendent and the ICO. The district shall use performance-based budgeting to ensure that the programs supportive of cultural and holistic wellness and balance services and programs are adequately funded. New paragraph, title HOJO Advisement Response Team, known as HEART. In order to implement this policy and provide support to students and staff, the district shall establish and fund the HOJO Advisement Response Team. The purpose of the HOJO Advisement Response Team, known as HEART, is to promote holistic wellness and balance of students and staff in a culturally appropriate manner, to provide proactive and preventative guidance and expand cultural awareness and sensitivity for students and staff in order to address cultural conflict and misunderstanding before it happens, to provide guidance on cultural protocols and etiquette, to address and work with administration to resolve matters involving cultural conflict, and to provide recommendations on cultural curricula for students and staff, including but not limited to situations in which staff and or students request cultural, holistic wellness and or balancing services, situations in which staff and or students experience traumatic / difficult circumstances that need cultural sensitivity and responsiveness, including but not limited to providing traditional holistic services. Promote, honor, and respect in a culturally appropriate manner regarding holiday programs and curricula that have cultural implications, including but not limited to Halloween / Day of the Dead, Veterans Day, Code Talker Day, and Sovereignty Day. Provide recommendations in the development of educational curricula and programming that honor and respect cultural and traditional holistic knowledge. Provide recommendations for educational curricula and programming that honor and respect cultural and traditional holistic knowledge protocols and etiquette responsive to natural events and disasters, including but not limited to eclipses, floods, tornadoes, earthquakes, rock slides, Northern Lights public health pandemic. Excuse me. Provide recommendations to district and school administrators regarding the potential need to delay or close affected schools and or provide alternate learning working arrangements in response to situations involving significant cultural implications. Participate and advise district and school administrators in the cleansing and blessing of schools/classrooms annually prior to start of the school year and as needed for certain situations, including but not limited to lightning strikes or the following items entering buildings: reptiles, not including horned toads, animal and human remains / cremains, or cultural artifacts entering buildings. Participate in developing curricula and programs that include, but are not limited to, cultural linguistic responsive instruction, known as CLRI, inclusion of CLRI in 90-day plans, field trips, culturally appropriate timelines for winter stories, events, and traditional cultural games, traditional cultural activities and arts, cultural and holistic wellness teachings, appropriate use of cultural artifacts, cultural apprenticeship and or language certificate programs. Collaborate with Equity Council and other student organizations in the planning and implementation of Heart Team activities and programs, as well as include Equity Council where appropriate in Heart Team actions and activities, and advise district administration and staff involved in student discipline and restorative justice matters on appropriate cultural and holistic wellness interventions and approaches. Participate in restorative justice discipline matters when appropriate to support students in working through behavioral misconduct and other rule violations. Advise district administration on the cultural safeguarding and appropriateness of having funerals, funeral receptions, and memorials in district facilities. The district's administration, school administration, safety team, social workers, counselors, educational professionals, and staff, and student discipline restorative justice administrators are required to engage, coordinate, and collaborate with the Heart Team in the above described situations. Depending on the situation being addressed by the Heart Team, the team will coordinate and collaborate with other available resources, including but not limited to district social workers, counselors, the safety team, and the employee assistance program, as well as external resources, including but not limited to knowledgeable community members and organizations, restorative justice, as well as community members that provide traditional holistic services. Heart Team membership. In consultation and collaboration with the lead administrator of ICO, the superintendent shall determine the members of the Heart Team. The lead administrator of ICO shall determine which Heart Team members respond to Heart Team events on a case-by-case basis. The lead administrator of ICO will provide recommendations to the superintendent on the provision of stipends to Heart Team members for services provided above and beyond their normal work duties. The lead administrator of ICO will have authority to remove any Heart Team members as needed. Heart Team decision-making. The superintendent, in consultation and collaboration with the lead administrator of ICO, has final decision-making authority on how the Heart Team responds to Heart Team events. Heart Team actions and activities must balance cultural considerations with applicable federal, tribal, and state laws. Likewise, the participation by students and or staff in cultural, holistic, and balanced activities is voluntary, and when appropriate, parental consent may need to be obtained as determined by the superintendent. Almost done. Creation of cultural literacy in district leadership and staff. Professional development curricula and programs as provided in this policy. Regarding the cultures described in this policy, language and holistic wellness and balance shall be developed in conjunction with ICO, district administration, and the Heart Team, also known as cultural PD. Attendance at relevant culture, heritage, and language conferences is encouraged. Compliance with this requirement would be pracked on PDPs, professional development plans. Failure to comply with these PD requirements may result in progressive discipline up to and including termination. Cultural PD is required for all district leadership and staff, including coaches, sponsors of student programs, and clubs and volunteers as follows. Board of Education, semi-annually. District administrators, semi-annually. Building administrators, semi-annually. Educational professional staff, semi-annually. All other district staff, including coaches, sponsors, and volunteers, semi-annually. Materials like books, videos, posters, pamphlets on various cultural heritage, language, and holistic wellness and balance services that are developed and or recommended by district administration, the ICO, and the HEART team will be readily available to all staff. Inclusion of culture in curriculum and school programs. Required implementation of curricula and programs as provided in this policy that include cultural, linguistic, responsive instruction, known as CLRI. CLRI considerations must also be included in district, departmental, classroom level 90-day plans, field trips, culturally appropriate timelines for winter stories, events, and traditional cultural games, traditional cultural activities and arts, cultural and holistic wellness teachings, cultural apprenticeship and or language certificate programs. And from there, the policy remains the same. So those are the recommended changes, and the ICO team and I, as well as superintendent, stand for any questions.
Questions from the board, Ms. Haskey?
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Mr. So?
Yeah, I'm actually looking at the policy right now. It looks pretty good. I'm ready to vote to approve it. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Chappelle, and the whole team that helped put together the policy.
Mr. Wells?
No, I don't have any questions.
Ms. Aspas?
Do you have questions, Ms. Aspas?
Yes. So, from what I gathered, she read through that whole proposal.
Yes, ma'am, that's correct. And you also have it in your email so you can review it before the next board meeting.
I didn't hear.
Can you tell her?
She didn't hear you. Try it again.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Can you hear what she's saying now?
Even if she repeats it, I can't hear it clearly, so.
If you say it again, I'll translate.
Okay. Board Member Aspas, the policy has been shared with you via Google Docs and email. And so the thought would be we have the first reading tonight. You all have time to digest it between now and the next meeting, and then we can make revisions, or you can give me revisions between now and then.
Okay, what she's saying is that the policy was shared on email and Google Docs as well, so you should have access to it. This was a first reading, and there will be a further reading, a second reading, next Thursday night at the board meeting. So you should have a lot of time to digest it and ask further questions for a possible third reading.
Okay, but I do want to say, from what I read, there was a bullet point that I was objecting to, and that was the funeral receptions, because I'm looking at the community, and there's not a lot of venues, and I believe if we can help our community in times like that, it would be great. And I looked at the chapter houses as well, and they seem to. I guess my looking is that they're more cultural, and yet they don't put off, using their facilities for, for funeral receptions. So I think, our venues would be good, to help our community in that way.
Okay, thank you for the comment. I don't know that either Ms. Chappelle or, let's say, the superintendent would be the best to try to explain why that was included, the way it was included. But I do believe we have some folks in the audience, perhaps a Dr. Begay, who has a little bit more understanding about the cultural significance that's involved in this situation.
And I do just want to clarify, Board Member Aspis, that this doesn't prohibit those things. It just says that the Heart team will collaborate with the superintendent to determine whether or how those proceed.
Did you catch that?
No, I didn't, but as you said earlier, this is only to digest now.
Yeah.
And there'll be another reading, but I do want our public and people to digest what I just said as well, because that's my stance on it.
Okay, we're going to have Dr. Begay just kind of explain a little bit further some of the thought behind whether or not it would be a good idea to use buildings for funeral receptions.
Okay. Yat shikado shidana adat da isanol tsagi shaibet anin shlino tratnasani bashichin kitlichini dashache ashi dashanala adat sachachi das kanaholye da nasha do ada shagan. Good evening, board president, vice president, secretary, and superintendent. I just wanted to provide some cultural background and culture education regarding that. And this is coming from a Navajo point of view. I just wanted to share that as the Nat people, our schools are considered a second home for our children. And so as a home, there's certain etiquettes and protocols that you have. And so if you think of your own home, you probably have that too for people that are listening. You have certain standards and things that you keep in place within your home. So our school is where majority of our children spend their time throughout the day. And for the first 12 years of their educational life, they spend more time in a school setting than at home. So that's why we see that as a second home for our children. That's where they rest, not necessarily sleep, but it's a learning environment, place. That's where they eat. And so that's how we think of our homes. And in that instance, it's a place where their mental, emotional, and physical, spiritual part of a child is being molded and developed. So in that sense, any type of distraction or potential afflictions can disturb this well-being of our Navajo children. And so in that instance, when it comes to death, death is one of our biggest I don't want to use the word taboo, but that's one of our biggest concerns as the Nat people. And so when a person is brought into a setting, in a setting of that sort, it disrupts and that holistic whole child well-being that exists there in that environment. Because death is something that we do not disturb after that occurs. And so it's just a sign of respect, and to disrupt that in that form is what we're most concerned about. In many cases, from our department, we've had to cleanse several schools that have had some type of event that has occurred, and our holistic practitioners are the ones that have identified that there has been some sort of affliction related from death in different ways, whether a staff member has brought in maybe like cremated ashes of their relative, or they wore it around their neck, like in a necklace. There have been situations of that sort that we've had to address and cleanse. And when that death is, I guess if you, it's like the air, it's in the air. And so you breathe it in, it goes into your body. Once it enters your body, it afflicts your mental, emotional, physical part of you. And that's what we mean by affliction. In Navajo, we call it ihotite. And so that's what we're talking about. So that's the part about having funerals in a school setting. The second part about what you're addressing, board member Aspis, is that as the NEP people, we've had these protocols put in place for many, many, many thousands of years in terms of ensuring that our wellness and balance is kept there as the NEP people, and that continues to be related to our mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual part of ourselves. And so if anything disrupts that, then that's where we have to provide our Navajo healthcare system, as I had mentioned at the special board meeting, and how that works to put things back into balance. So in our teachings, the protocol and the etiquette revolves around funerals, like the way things are conducted, and because you're in that environment of death, and to go to a cemetery as well, where you're surrounded by more death, you have to put that protocol in place in order to ensure that that disruption that happened with the death is not taken back to an environment where there's not death in that type of environment, whether it involves your home or your family. And so it's like, if you can see it, like it's like a contaminant. And so you're bringing that back. But as the NIP people, we have what we put in place for our protocols is that we use lightning herb to cleanse ourselves if we're going to go back to like a reception. So that balance gets put back in there, and that death, it takes that off of you. And so that's the protocol for that. But that's not practiced, as I had shared before at the special board meeting. It's become a choice for many of our Navajo people, but there's many of us who still follow those practices, the protocols, and the etiquette that were put in place before any of us have been here. So if you could see it in that sense, that's what we're referring to. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to support the policy as written. Thank you.
Ms. Aspis, do you have anything you want to add?
No, I don't. I just digest that until the next reading.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Burgay. Ms. Chappelle? I have a question. I don't know what the board thinks about this portion of it. I was in a conversation last week and then again this week about attendance. Mr. Deswood's been very involved with the state with attendance. We have an attendance plan. When our students miss days for ceremonies, for cultural events, they're excused absences, but they do count towards chronic absenteeism. So they're included in those figures. And we have quite a few students missing for ceremonies. If we could include something in this policy about attendance, if it were inserted, we could probably utilize asynchronous learning days. And so students who would be missing school would actually be able to do school work and have access to whatever platforms teachers might be using, Google platforms or others, and make up the work they're missing. And they wouldn't count toward chronic absenteeism. There would be a separate code that would be kind of a culture code that would allow us to code those students in such a way that they wouldn't count toward that chronic absenteeism number. And so it would reduce chronic absenteeism across the district. I don't know how significant of a number it would be, but somewhat. So I wonder if we can try to slip that in there. I don't know exactly where. Should have thought of that earlier for you, but if we could do that for the next reading, maybe that would be helpful.
Absolutely, and that's why this is helpful, because we start thinking about it and then things pop up. So thank you. I will definitely work on that.
Yeah, I think that's going to be under the district attendance policy. I forgot the citation, but yeah, it's under our attendance policy.
Put it in both.
Oh, I think I'll work on putting it in both places so there's a connection. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Chappelle.
Anything further?
Steve.
Okay, go ahead.
Nope.
Okay, with in mind, we're not talking, I mean, I hold the importance of ceremonies and things like that, and it is it is serious, but again, on my part, we have to be fair, and not everybody is traditional. I myself practice both, and then we have some that are strictly Christian and or a different religion, and so what about them? And so I hope people keep that in mind. I wish we could all come from one background or one practice, but we are diversified, and so again, I'd have to go with just being there for the community and providing that space. There's not a lot to choose from, and as it is, I think Shiprock chapter is still that. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. I do have some questions. And I'm glad that Ms. Aspis made the comment that she did, because I'm always talking about equity. I mean, how many different cultures do we have in this school district?
Board Member Montoya, the cultures that we do have in the district are listed at the top of this policy, and so the changes to this policy relate back to that. It's actually in the, let's see, let me see what paragraph it's in. It's part of the demographics. I think it's this third. Yes, the third paragraph on the first page of the policy. And so in that, the new changes, I made sure to incorporate all of the cultures in the district. And so, for example, this is our first, draft at this. And so I'll point you to the language at the very beginning of the new changes, where it says, as part of the district's community outreach efforts, Essentially, the district will meet with students, parents, staff, and community members from each culture that is present in the district to essentially determine what their needs are to also put in the policy.
I appreciate that because when you read through this, I get it, I understand it. I hope people understand where I'm coming from. And I say that because, I mean, what are we going to do if something is contradictory to our Filipino families and their culture, or the Hispanic community, or like the Latino community, and contradictory or goes against theirs? How are we going to address that? You talk about the heart team. You can pick every culture to have them sit on that heart team.
I mean, potentially that's what between the ICO and the superintendent that could occur. But my response to what you're asking is that the reason the language is the way it is that it's not a hard and fast black and white rule. You have to approach every situation case by case. And that's why I also included the balancing language so that, and I can beef the balancing language up a little more to make clear that this is a balancing, it is not black and white.
And then again, in one of the bullet points, it says the professional development is encouraged, but then 2 sentences later, failure to hold them accountable.
Right, so that's progressive discipline. So if they're not attending cultural requirements for PD, then they'll go through progressive discipline. And if they're flagrant about it, and essentially, I mean, that would be an amount to insubordination, then yes, they would potentially be subject to termination.
You're giving them an option when you say encouraged.
Oh, the encouragement, sorry, my apologies. The encouragement is only for conferences, not for the PD itself.
Okay.
The PD is mandatory, and what it's saying is, in addition to PD, you're encouraged to attend conferences of the same type of information.
So if somebody on the heart team is Filipino and wants something that is specific to Filipino culture, then if an individual doesn't take it, then they're going to be held accountable?
If the professional development created by the district overseen by the board includes an element of Filipino culture and teachers or other staff refuse to take that, yes, they would be held accountable.
See, I'm just trying to get to a point of reasonability with this and the way that it's constructed, and the way people read it and understand it, and the way it's incorporated. I'm just playing devil's advocate because a lot of it's going to be questioned. And what I said at the beginning of this discussion during a special meeting, I think we can develop a very good guiding principle and document that would be a model for others to pick up across the state, especially with the numerous pueblos that we have and the other tribes that we have within the state. And then again, maybe even something submitted to NIEA or National Congress of American Indians for other schools to look at and possibly utilize as well.
Absolutely, Board Member Montoya. This is just our first discussion draft,
okay.
So it's definitely not set in stone. That's why it's first reading, and we can tweak whatever needs tweaking to make things more clear.
Yeah, again, I want people to understand that it's malleable.
It's a living document, absolutely.
Absolutely, and again, it's going to be constructed to a point of reasonability that an individual who is not of this culture can look at it and say, okay, well, there is room for me, and I'm not being excluded, or one is completely, totally outweighing another.
And given that I was only reading these amendments and not the entire policy, I can see how that could cause confusion.
Absolutely.
Because the entire policy includes not only all of our cultures, but all of the state statutes regarding cultural education for the cultures in our state. So,
Thank you for recognizing that.
yep, yes, sir.
Are there any further questions from the board?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think my gray line or area is that regardless of your background, religion, and so forth, there shouldn't be like caskets or burials or bodies in our schools. That's what I want to echo is we shouldn't do that. Our schools are not, we shouldn't be doing that. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, and then again, even that point that is brought up by Ms. Asmussen and now Mr. So, quite frankly, I think we can delineate between a funeral service and a reception after.
The language, as I mentioned before, just to clarify, is crafted so that that can be determined on a case-by-case basis.
Okay. Yeah, I'd grab that. But again, I just want the general population to understand that, again, there is that flexibility that we're looking at to be able to address those situations because of where we are and the limited resources that we have available to the community.
The language also, points to safeguards as well, so there are considerations.
All right. Is there anything further that you have for us?
No, sir.
All right. If there's no further questions, thank you.
Thank you.
Look forward to further conversation. On to
Executive session.
item 3, executive session. A, convene executive session discussion on collective bargaining agreement as permitted under NMSA 1978, section 10-15-1, H5 of the New Mexico Open Meetings Act. Do I have a motion to convene into executive session?
I motion.
Ms.
I will
Haskell.
second, Mr. Chair.
Second by Mr. So. Vote a roll call. Ms. Haskell?
Yes.
Mr. So.
Oh, Biga, yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
Ms. Asmus? Still on? She dropped. Four, myself is 5. The time is
Yes.
now, thank you, 7:21.
Okay, see you in there.
We will convene into executive session.
Keep this phone going, or do you want to try to get other link?
That motion?
There you go. Thank you. The time is now 8:04. Item 3, executive section B, reconvene in open session stated that the board has discussed in the executive session only the subject identified in the agenda as a reason for which the meeting was closed. Discussion on collective bargaining agreement as permitted under NMSA 1978, Section 10-15-1 H5 of the New Mexico Open Meetings Act. Could I get a motion to reconvene?
Mr. Chair, I made the motion to reconvene in open session. Thank you.
Second?
I second that.
Mr. Wells. Vote, roll call, Ms. Haskey,
Yes.
Mr. So,
I vote yes.
Mr. Wells,
Yes.
Ms. Aspis, I believe, is no longer online, and myself, that's 4. We are now reconvened at 8:05. C, possible board action on items discussed in executive session. There is no action to be taken at this point in time. 4, discussions, items on the regular school board meeting. Does anybody on the board have any suggestions for next Thursday's meeting? If you do not at this time, could you please entertain those to the superintendent through the email? Would that work, superintendent?
That works. I don't
Yes,
have
sir.
anything right now.
Very good.
Yeah, I think for me, it's just an updated, like, monthly attendance report, all of our schools by grade and school. Thank
You want
you.
a report or you want an email?
Probably email.
Oh, I do would like a report on the, because they got their scores back for middle of the year, right?
I don't believe, I was in a school yesterday that was doing the testing.
If we
So I
do,
don't-
can we get those?
Yeah, I don't know if they're gonna be done.
No. That was the other one. I thought we had,
The
okay, they're
MOI.
still, all right.
Yeah, they're
alrighty.
still taking.
I got you.
Probably January.
Okay, thank you. I retract that last statement. Item 5, adjournment. Motion to adjourn the work session. I don't think anybody
I
wants.
motion to adjourn.
I second the motion.
Motion by Ms. Haskey. Second by Mr. So. Vote a roll call, Ms. Haskey.
Yes.
Mr. So.
Oh, yes, Biga.
Mr. Wells.
Yes, sir.
And myself, that's 4. The time is now 8:06. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you all very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Thank you so much,
Thank you,
Gary.
Ron.